Just a little sound check. Can everybody hear me good?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
My holiday project was setting up a new desk and a new webcam and a new microphone configuration. But we're only just dipping our toes in the in actually using it for meetings as over compared to the normal kind of laptop.
Well, Happy New Year, Celeste. I'm sure it's amazing. We can't see the desk, but I'm sure it's incredible. It's like a game.
You know, you're joking. You're
You know
joking.
the LED, the lights that glow underneath it to make sure it looks good.
I was telling Priyanka this last week, and FYI, everybody, Priyanka unfortunately cannot make it. She's a bit sick today, but I grew up with parents who were not particularly wealthy, so I'm used to furniture being kind of like low quality. So when I think about buying furniture, it viscerally upsets me because I'm like, I don't want to spend money on something that's gonna break. Like, but I actually spent money on like a really nice desk. I like wasn't sure if it was the right investment, but like it absolutely was because I'm like it's so solid. Like it's super nice. It's like a sit-stand desk, so I can adjust it a little bit. Like it genuinely is very, very nice. Okay. So we're just gonna wait for a few more people to join, I think. I don't think this is going to be a particularly long meeting as we're kind of just gearing up from the break. I personally don't have much on the agenda, but if you do have anything you would like to discuss, please open up the agenda and add that now. And please add your name to the attendees list too, so that we can see who joined.
Mm-hmm.
Give me just a second. I'm adding Sorry, I'm looking for a very specific link, and I can't find it because it's naturally because I'm on a call, and because it's first thing in the year. That is okay though. That's where you put it, Steven. All right. I was not expecting it there. Okay. I may need to re-enable editing on the meeting doc. That is a very, very good point.
Yeah, I just had to request access by the
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable anybody with the link can edit for the duration of this meeting. We have unfortunately received a little bit of harassment on this doc, so we had to lock it down.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of par with the course on this work, unfortunately. In future, we are probably going to move to something that is trackable via GitHub and goes through an approval process in that regards. But yeah, I think this is kind of where we're at. Oops. Alexander from Eindhoven University of Technology. A, first off, cool to see you. B, you added yourself as an attendee under the template. If you want to hop one down to January 1st and add yourself there, that would be ideal. I'm super excited to see somebody from academia in this group though. So it's really, really cool to see you. Yeah, let's get started. Today is a pretty low-key meeting. It's probably just going to be a few updates. We have been recording this entire time, and I apologize for not mentioning that because I don't remember enabling it. The main thing that we need to update you on, if you check the meeting notes, and I will drop it in the chat as well. Per last week's meeting, we have a set of 4 work streams that this initiative is going to start splitting off into. And the thing that we need all of you to do right now is attach yourselves to a work stream which makes the most sense for you. I'll go over those really, really quickly. Again, just on the call. What we're effectively thinking is there's a work stream around open source and the documentation and process and roadmaps needed for open source projects to initiate these kinds of changes. There's a company or enterprise specific work stream which exists in parallel to the open source one, but has the same goals of how does one execute these kinds of changes in an enterprise and what kind of resources are needed there. And similarly, how do we work with the standards bodies and standards development organizations and what kind of resources are needed there? There's broadly speaking a work stream under program management, which is what is the actual language that we're changing. I'm specifically leading that one up. How do we intake new organizations and new members? We've got some really cool stuff coming out of IBM as well as Intel, as I believe Andre also wants to speak to some stuff that they're doing at Dell today. And how do we take that in a logical manner? So that's very much an onboarding and program management aspect. And there's kind of a marketing and communications aspect as well. So as I mentioned, the link is in the chat. So please sign up for a work stream. That is the next step. Any questions?
Has there been interest in some tooling? I know it came up on one of the previous calls, just like tools for either scanning or prevention. I don't know that there's not an official work stream yet for the technology tools, correct?
Stephen, you have happily joined us. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes. So we're thinking initially that that maybe that fits in intake. There isn't a specific work stream to work on tooling, but maybe there should be. So yeah.
Stephen, I think there should be one. I had raised it at our meeting last week, and I based on what we've seen, I think it needs its own focus.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Dale, would you like to speak a little bit to that as to kind of what's happening at IBM later in the meeting? Would that be okay?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, thank you. I will put you down. So aside from that, a couple of general updates. One, we have a Slack server now so that we can talk more asynchronously. Hooray. We will drop a link to that in the mailing list after this meeting. I am hesitant to post it on this doc for the aforementioned reasons of we have gone through an unfortunate bit of harassment on this doc already. So that will be in the mailing list. The other thing I'm personally working on is adding a blog to the site so that we can start talking about the work that we're doing. Any questions?
Yeah, one note about the Slack server. I'm still parting our dust a little bit. I'm still doing some setup on that one, but the Slack server has two-factor enabled on it, and it also requires admin approval for all invites. So trying to trying to work on moderation a little bit. So if you do join the server, please make sure that you also set up two-factor soon afterwards, or you will get booted.
Thank you for that. I noticed two-factor was on, but I wasn't sure why. And naturally, it's because you were being very thoughtful. Okay. So aside from that, we've got a few things under open discussion, and I'm wondering if I have the right order. Stephen, did you want to talk about what's happening at VMware for maybe 5 minutes?
Sure. Yeah. We actually have, oh, sorry, no, I was on mute. I think we have a few folks on the call. I would actually like to hear from Dell. I know Andre is on this call.
Wow, well. I like that, Stephen. I'd like to hear from Stephen, but no, I'm kidding.
To be fair, I think I put him on the spot.
So I guess I was on the agenda for two different parts. Let me give you kind of the bigger part and then tell you a little bit about what we're doing with Dell. So a couple of months ago, Monica was on the call from Microsoft, and I started kind of exchanging best practices. We started reaching out with each other. And we all had the situation that a number of large enterprises were reaching out to us to ask about how we were handling the inclusive naming efforts. So we connected with Dale and Carla also, and Jonathan from Red Hat, and a number of the companies started coming together to really discuss those larger enterprise. When I say enterprise, it's the large scope outside of just our software products. How do we look at things such as our documentation, our support articles, our HR, our global supply? How do we work with our partners? So taking some of the language that, how do we share that across the entire organization and have some type of coordinated effort? So also working, Stephen, as you well know, with the VMware team in terms of doing that. I don't know, Monica, if you wanted to talk a little bit about it, and then we can talk about maybe how we propose to build out that work stream.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm unable to edit the doc, but when I can edit it, I'll add my name so that people know that I attended. My name is Monica Rush, and I work at Microsoft. I work on the documentation team for cloud and AI. And yeah, Andre and I got together, and then we learned about this larger initiative. So it's nice to kind of pull everything together where we can. Microsoft was kind of inspired by the GitHub branch name change from master to main. Now, I mean, Microsoft, in addition to lots of other companies, began cleaning up their language after the Ferguson riot. So this goes back to 2014. But it hadn't been, maybe it had been unintentionally deprioritized. So this was an opportunity to kind of take it more seriously and work across the industry. So that's why this group is so interesting to us. So we did make some initial updates to 4 terms that we're in the process of implementing, master, slave, whitelist, and blacklist. We came up with guidelines. We talked to all sorts of groups at Microsoft to make sure we came to the right conclusion. We didn't want it to just be marketing. We didn't want it to just be engineering. We didn't want it to just be style. We wanted it to be, the product of all those perspectives. So we think we came up with something that's, good enough for now. And then Celeste, in the last meeting, you asked for someone who wanted to join the language effort. So I'm kind of interested in that and can perhaps contribute what we've done so far. Yeah. And then kind of, work on it in the future to better align. Yeah.
And I mean, that's very much where, so from my perspective in the Linux Foundation and the CNCF world, that's very much where the Kubernetes community is at too, where it's we've made a few updates, or we're in the process of making a few updates. And my question for myself in regards to this initiative is, how do we then, what's the next step after that? And I think that's the interesting thing to explore personally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So building on to where Monica was saying, what we had wanted to propose was really take our efforts, which were standalone and just informal, and bring them into this effort and really build out that enterprise work stream to bring together companies that have similar type of issues, where we can bring them together, talk about sharing best practice, and really align with everything from the terminology effort that's going on to the intake to some of the various work streams that are going on. Because the ultimate goal is to have a list that all of us can be able to refer to say, here are some of the alternatives, here are some of the words that are in scope. And I think, building out that work stream allows us to collect it. And I know, Dale, you and I have talked about it also, and Carla, it makes sense to be leveraging really an industry standard group as opposed to doing a parallel effort where we're all trying to.
So Andre, $1 million question for you is, would you like to help lead up the enterprise work stream?
Yes, I would like to volunteer for it. And I think we have a number of other companies we've talked to who would be interested even to joining this effort who aren't on the call today.
That's really cool. That's really, really exciting. And I think maybe just to give you a bit of a picture of where Stephen and I think this is going in the next few weeks is once the work streams start to solidify themselves, which is again why it's super important to attach yourself where you feel most comfortable. This meeting will probably become more of a status update and a stand-up. And then the work streams themselves are either they'll decide how they want to work as smaller groups. And whether they want to have a group meeting or whether they want to work asynchronously, whatever that is. But the efficiency of having a 20 or 30 person meeting is low. So that's kind of where we're thinking. Okay, awesome, thank you.
So one note on so we had discussed I think it was always a plan to spin up a vertical work stream for around company efforts. We essentially want to accomplish similar things in all of these vertical work streams and be able to share the knowledge across them when possible. So one thing that came up in the leads meeting was, do we want to call it enterprise, right? So we were initially thinking, I guess I was initially thinking company. Enterprise has some connotations that may feel exclusive for companies who are smaller than quote unquote enterprise size. So are we okay with calling it company workstream, or do we think that the efforts are different enough that they should be two separate work streams?
I was going to ask that also. My proposal would be, and definitely interested to hear what everybody thinks, is that we're talking really about a size and a magnitude of many different teams, many different organizations, all having to work together in a concerted effort. That's why I was using the word enterprise, where a smaller company may not have all of those issues. That it may make sense to have two separate work streams, because I think that doesn't mean it can't be cross-pollinated. But Monica, what is your thoughts? And Dale also, I know we had the discussions, but any thoughts on that?
You mean, so is the main question whether we have two groups, basically, kind of companies and other, or is it the naming for it? Because I know, the Microsoft style, it's organization. That's the conclusion we came to, because then it includes universities. I mean, then it includes everybody's
partners, suppliers, everything.
Right. Yeah. So
so I have a little bit of a different point of view. I think we need to spend some time, and maybe it's done on this group or it's done with intake, but really looking at what are the concerns that are unique to whatever that are organization specific, that should be worked as an organization work stream, as opposed to the things that are common. And instead of driving duplication of efforts for enterprise versus, or organization versus non-organization, focus the organization work on what is unique to an organization. So could we take a stab at that? And happy to work with you on that. Sure. And because I think we would make much more forward progress faster if we took that approach than just working on the same things but in two parallel universes, if you will. Right?
And maybe Stephen, then the better phrase is organization, maybe not company or enterprise. But Dale, totally agree. It's it's supposed to be complementary, not overlapping. what the
Yeah.
proposal was is the first meeting is to come together and kind of identify what are these things, what is the scope that we want to do.
Yeah, but it would be good to have someone who is not representing an organization entity be part of that meeting.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, we have clarity on what are the common concerns that we will work within the domains or the work streams that already exist. And then what are the concerns that are specific to organizations that we would work within the organization work stream. That's kind of where my thinking is.
I think that makes good sense. Stephen, you were adding
Does that work for folks?
I like that a lot. My biggest worry for having multiple work streams around that similar topic is kind of, again, like you said, duplicating that effort or maybe fragmenting too early when it's not required.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe the proposed part would be before our next meeting or a follow-up, just to have open it up to whoever wants to attend to discuss some of that specific org level, what the charter would be or what the focus would be for that work stream. So we can do that as a follow-up.
That sounds awesome.
I think that sounds good too. And I am reorganizing my notes as we go here. So I have a note from Dale and a note from Carla, and they're both IBM related. I believe Carla, so there was a discussion that Carla Quinn brought up a few meetings ago, which is around IBM kind of approved the changes to certain words, but they also vetted certain words as okay. And I think you were going through the process of seeing if you could share that, right, Carla?
Yes, I am. I need to go through and get it in the right format and put it on the GitHub page that Dale and I have set up.
Okay.
So that's in plan. Well, I was going to do it last week. This week.
Okay, it happens. It was a bit of a week last week.
It was.
It was a bit of a week. So that's totally fine. We meet bi-weekly. Do you think you could be ready for our next meeting to kind of talk about that? And then we can talk about how we want to, or what we want to do with that information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's useful stuff because we've set up some principles that cover a lot of things. And I think it's been interesting to go through a lot of the terms that IBMers have submitted and see how the principles apply to them.
Okay, I think that sounds really, really cool. And Dale, you mentioned that IBM has some tooling that it might be ready to share.
Yeah, so actually it's a big topic, but let me just go through quickly what the challenges are. So yes, there's some tooling we've been working on to at minimum complement what tools that are industry standard like Acrolinks does today, but make it possible for the open source community to contribute to development and extending those tools. And really we're looking at tools for scanning content for inclusive language, but then also looking at how do you leverage some machine learning AI to curate that content and continuously contribute to it. So people actually have a source they can work with, or they can use their own data sources and contribute to that, especially as organizations or communities go in a different direction. So for example, if our focus is inclusive language around, let's say, racial bias first, but there's a group that really wants to focus on inclusive language around LGBT, and they have expertise in that space. Can they have a data set that they curate, they manage to ensure that the right terminology with the right translation concerns are addressed? So we've been working on building this out. But one of the things that that has, let's say, slowed the open source sharing of that has been concerns around um, content curation and security. And I know Stephen and Ed are working on this for this community, but it's a big concern that was raised. So there's two pieces, right? The concept of bias and fairness, right? And the algorithms that are used to determine whether something is fair or not. And that's a big topic in the AI world, where the question is being asked, who are you to decide that that's biased or not? Is it about how people feel? What if they are reacting to the misuse of a term, Scrum Master? Some people react to Scrum Master or Scrum Master poorly because of the way the role has been implemented, not because of the definition of the role per se. So there's that one aspect of it. But then the other aspect is, how do you ensure that malactors or trolls don't introduce terms that are not biased terms, or not what we would consider to be biased terms, and get it ratified as bias within, you know, a construct like ours? And we could say, okay, we'll moderate it and we'll manage it. But let's say we are making tools available in the open source world. A group gets gets hold of it and they start populating it with terms that are not biased, right? If they said, for example, diversity and inclusion, the concept in itself is biased, therefore we should ban those terms. What is the community construct around it that will guard against those things? And so one of the things we've done is look at first the security, identity and access management. And you mentioned two-factor authentication. And Steve, I could probably hack that in about 15 seconds, right? So one of the things we're looking at is, what do we need to do to harden the security and access around tools like that and communities like ours, so that you have a trusted set of experts who can say a term should be that term, and is valid as a term that promotes bias, and that term is not. And then how do you take that so it is something we can protect, right? So protect the integrity of the work that's being done by a trusted set of participants. And the trusted set of participants is basically, and as I'm told from the security experts, it's never going to be completely hack proof, but we have the right secondary controls in place to prevent it from being undermined. So let me pause on that security topic first and see if there's any comments, because I know you probably didn't like that I said I could hack it in 15 minutes, but 15 seconds. But there are ways that people can come in and say, I'm Dale Davis. They have Dale's bona fides, and you guys know my voice. So if they're speaking, that's different. But if they're writing in content, and it says, you know, with authority that is biased, and here's the reason, and they basically have usurped my identity. How do you ensure that Dale, or someone who says they're recommended by Dale, is really who they are, right? And that's to protect the integrity of the work we're doing. The second part is, how do you ensure that in the context in which the terms are being used, now this is a user experience from where they are in the world, not just in the US, that term is resonating with the community as a valid replacement term. And it's not just about the language, but about the technology to support the changes that we're proposing. So those are the two things we've been working through. And I thought at first that they were making it much harder than it needed to be. But after working with some of our government relationship teams, some of the folks who worked on our AI work with facial recognition, I realized that there's a lot of vulnerability that we could be exposed to if we're not aware of what can and has gone wrong in good tech. So that's where we're focused, right? Exposing those. But what I'd like to have us do, if possible, is put a community around this community, around the tools we're exposing, get folks contributing to it, but really try to see how we can make this useful. So in the future, when people are looking to identify terms and replace terms, they get the help they need, not just with a tool that could be misused, but with the right IT support, the security support, the fairness support in AI, if AI is being used to help with that going forward. So that's the work we're doing. And our plan is next month that we'll open source that. And I'd love to get this community support around it. I'll send you guys some stuff to read eventually, but that's really the problems we're trying to deal with. And I don't know if anybody else is there or has overcome some of those issues, but that's really what we've been dealing with.
Bill, this is just a comment from Candace. I work for GitLab, managing diversity. One of the things we have, and I'll share it into the chat, is what we've used as misused terms in our handbook. And if anyone knows kind of a little bit about how we may operate, we put kind of like everything in a handbook. So happy to share, but I would also like to collaborate, because when I think about the global piece that you kind of put out there, where, you know, when it comes to things being compromised, the integrity of things, I think that, you know, if we could come up with a list of those global terms that would be substitutions, would probably be helpful for all of us. So although, for example, we are in different phases of like I said, we have things in the handbook that are already listed, what those might look like for others to be able to collaborate with that as well. So again, happy to share that here, but would love to kind of talk about that more, whether it's offline or however it would be best.
And really what I think that's definitely what this group will do a great job of accomplishing. But some of the folks that we might want to be a part of our community are those in security, especially, because we have to have I don't want to say paranoia, but a healthy regard for the fact that not everybody is going to want to work with a set of terms that are valid terms that are biased terms. We have already seen that there are folks who would like to populate databases or resources with terms that are non-biased, or at least stretching the definition of bias for one purpose. One use case is to undermine the work like this. So if I start flooding the Wikipedias or data sources with terms that are not valid terms that promote bias, it does call into question the terms that we are using, for example. So that's the angle that we want to look at, is the negative side of it, right? How could what we're doing be misused, and what are we going to do to prevent against that? It's kind of an interesting problem, and one that I think we might want to get ahead of. I don't know if others have dealt with that in your companies, but if you have, I'd love to participate with you and understand what your experiences have been.
I dropped in the chat for everyone to be able to see an example within the handbook of kind of just, of course, it's a very GitLab specific as it relates to misused terms, and we have the column where it's misused terms, the alternatives, and the reason why, whether it be bias, whether it be the connotations of it. And so, would love to expand and kind of collaborate, like I said, to add in additional things that maybe would be helpful for everyone. And to your point, everyone's not going to want to use those global terms, but it's still a level of alignment that, I think all companies probably could adhere to use if we could create something like that.
Yeah, this is something that I need to pour over in general, but I like your list just at a glance. So, okay. In the interest of time, because we've got about 10 minutes left, I actually want to jump down to Demetrius, because Karsten, your comment of GitHub org membership and sorting this out, we're on it. And to that point, this Google Doc will be probably going away at some point for security and management purposes. Demetrius.
Sure. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to briefly announce that, as you all know, GitHub made the change where for new repos that were created on GitHub, that you can change it from master to main. But as of tomorrow, we will be going live with being able to have that function for existing repos. So if you have an existing repo on GitHub, you'll be able to make that change from master to main starting tomorrow. So once that is released, I'll send out the announcement and all the information to this group.
That's super cool. That's really, really cool.
Very awesome.
Yeah. I think that's it, folks. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up? All right. Going on.
So I guess the question I have for the folks is, did no one else have the issue that I had where people were actually contributing terms that were non-biased, but giving the appearance that they could be considered a biased term?
We've dealt with it a bit in Kubernetes in the work that we're doing around naming, and it's the irritating thing is it's very hard to tell whether it is a well-intentioned contribution or whether it's designed to waste your time. The tactic, so in Kubernetes, we're doing things a little bit more manually right now, where to change a term, you first have to propose the term to the mailing list, and then there's a discussion, and then we make a decision and we record the decision. What we have done is on the occasion where people have made suggestions like, well, I think diversity is an exclusive term. We say that is very nice. We have a process for taking in these recommendations. There is a format that we like to see them in and a way that we want you to move through that. So if you think this is a valid term, you are welcome to propose a change to the group. But we expect to see in a certain format, we expect to see a certain kind of writing and research around why you think you're making this change. And frankly, about 70% of the time that shuts people down because they're just not willing to do the work.
I think we have an even higher success rate than 70%. Honestly,
it's something like that.
I'm not sure that I've seen someone come back and do the work. So I think that
we've suggested quite a few people to do the work, but so I was just finishing up one of these recommendations that we're about to merge in today, and it's quite a bit of work. You know, it's like a page and a half of writing. It has to go through a discussion period, which usually takes 3 or 4 weeks. And then once you open the PR, it's open for review for another 2 or 3 weeks, and people usually have comments. And most people just aren't willing to put up with that process. So it's security by irritation, I guess, is how I would say.
Yeah. and we for IBM internal, I think that works well. And again, I'm voicing the concerns that were raised by our legal and AI teams, which is when it's one thing when you have the manual process, but I think Mark asked, and he's correct, that when you are making tools available to communities who may not all be well-intentioned to use, how do we help ensure that those tools are being populated by terms until the standards communities all catch up? What do we do to help guard against terms being created that are listed as biased terms, which are not?
I think the answer is process. Personally, I don't think you're going to get away from that, because this is not, language is not something you can quantify easily. Its meaning changes and shifts over time. It changes with culture. And so it's not, I don't think you can get away from some aspect of it not being non-programmatic, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
But I think what we one of the things that, so you're on my point, and some others may have a different point of view, but one of the things we owe the community is to write that down until we prove otherwise. It says, even with tools to help automate some of this, there is always going to be a need for secondary process controls points, and in some cases, primary process control points, because left on, unaddressed, these are the risks, right? So I think we do need to include that as part of the, this work effort that we're doing here. Because there are companies I've spoken to who really think they can automate this entirely, and they are unaware of the risks of doing that.
No, it's not going to work.
It
would be nice. It would be
but,
nice, but it's
there's
probably a
lots
bad
who
idea.
don't know, right? And don't know the exposures. Okay, good. So I think you guys get my point. It's not just about saying what is good and what is validated, but what is how do you guard against the things that are bad getting into mainstream and being considered good, right? Which kind of, is the whole point of why we're here.
Dale, quick question. Do you eventually envision, and I'm just throwing this out, collectively the best practices or the criteria you've talked about before of determining what's in scope and what's not, that maybe that's the crowdsource or the open source collective part that we can put out to say, these are some of the things that we use to evaluate what type of language, is that kind of your end state eventually, you think, publish guidelines, for that human evaluation. And to Celeste's point, it could change in 6 months. There could be other words or other contexts that come up with this.
Guidelines are really, really, really helpful, and guiding principles, which is what we've tried to establish. But I think it always comes back with terminology. No matter what you try to suggest, at some point you need some human beings to sit down and take a look at it. And you need the right group of human beings who have the knowledge and the background and also the authority to make the decisions. We found that, people submitted terms and they did do the work, and a lot of it had, they'd done some research and pasted a bunch of stuff in, and a lot of it we weren't sure of their intentions for some of it, but we went through all of it and considered it and made our decisions about it.
So just a note for the Kubernetes working group. Actually, one of our first focus was to make sure that we had a framework for evaluation as opposed to explicit recommendations. We wanted to be able to create something that had widespread value. So like our framework might be an initial look at what that could be for this group as well.
Okay. I'm going to wrap it, everybody. Sign up for work streams. Please do it by the end of this week so that we can move forward happily at our next meeting. Work streams.
So one note here, Jason made a good point in the chat that we wanted, our Intel wanted to say some words, and we ran down the clock on this meeting. So Jim, if you're on the call, I think you are on the call. You are first on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And we can start doing
the timing actually works out well because my colleague Kevin, who's the deeper expert, has been driving this for longer. He has a hard conflict that he couldn't swap today, so it'll work out well.
So the 25th.
Great.
And sorry, his name was? I'm
Kevin
literally
Stanton.
Kevin Stanton. Okay.
I can go and type it in if you've got it. I got to
Cool.
get back to the notes page.
Oh, jeez. No, it's okay. I messed up my own notes, so you are on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
The work is done. Okay. Sorry about that. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Stephen?
Go forth. I think
Go forth. Please sign up for work streams. Stephen will remind you again via email this week, but that is starting to split ourselves off into interest groups is going to be the next step. And the step after that is kind of doing a group planning exercise, I think, around what work needs to happen, what groups need to be attached to what work, and starting to build our own backlog. But we need you to attach yourselves first. Okay, I am going to call this meeting. Thank you all so much for your participation. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you all in a couple of weeks. Stopping the recording
New
in
Year.
3, 2, 1.